Hey everybody and welcome back. Thanks for watching. I just got finished building 3 of the simplest, cheapest projects that you can think of. These are great gifts, they're perfect for stocking stuffers, they do well at craft shows, and you can build them all in an afternoon. But before we get started, please take a second and hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, it gives me motivation to keep making videos just like this for you. Let's go. For the triple tealight holder, start off by ripping down a couple 3-inch strips. You need about 18 inches overall, so if you got a piece that's 18 inches or over, you only need 1 strip. In my case, I've got about a 16-inch piece here, so I've got to make 2. Now my maple cutoffs here have quite a wobble in them, so I'm going to take them to the joiner and flatten one side of them. Of course, if you're using already milled lumber, you won't have to do this. Then I'll run my pieces through the planer so that I have 2 flat sides now. Again, if you're using store-bought lumber, you don't need to do this. I'm going to mark out my pieces so that I can cut them to length. I need 3 pieces at 4 inches long and a 4th piece at 5 inches long. Now I'm going to mark out the 4-inch pieces only for the tealight holders. And the top piece of this is going to be marked out right in the middle. The other 2 pieces need the holes offset slightly. So instead of marking the 2-inch mark, which is right in the center, I'm going to mark 1.5 inches from one of the ends and then find center of that. I'm going to use an 1.75 inch Forstner bit to drill out the holes because that's what fits the tealight holders that I'm using. I'll leave a link to those in the description below. Here I'm using a piece of scrap beneath my finished piece to prevent blowout when I drill the hole. And right about here I'm realizing I don't like how close my fingers are to that drill bit. So using a little masking tape and some CA glue, I'm going to stick my finished piece to the scrap piece itself. And where the scrap piece is quite a bit larger, it gives me a little bit of extra room to clamp it to my drill press. So being very careful to line up with my marks that I laid out earlier, I drill out all 3 of my holes. I use a 3/8 roundover bit just to soften the corners on the outside of the piece, and I'm also going to do the inside of the hole as well. Then I'll sand it all down, first with 150 grit, then with 220. Making sure to hand sand inside that hole as well. To assemble it, I'm going to put a tealight holder in the top piece and just make sure that I've got enough room for it to sit all the way down without hitting the pieces below. Then I'll set my square so that I can make sure that both sides are even. I only need a thin strip of glue here to hold everything together, and I don't want any squeeze out in those hard to sand places either. And I'm going to use my CA glue again here. It just holds everything nice and tight and prevents stuff from sliding around. When you have little pieces like this, it can just be a pain to clamp them. If you don't use CA glue, you don't know what you're missing. This stuff comes in handy in a ton of different places. I'll actually leave a link to this in the description below as well. And since we set our square up already, it makes it nice and easy just to make sure everything's lined up as I hold it down and let the glue dry. Then just flip it over and install that last 5-inch long piece on the bottom, making sure that it's even on both sides as well. Then I'll use 2 small clamps just for good measures to hold it down while the glue sets. Once the glue is dry, you can grab some stain and give it a coat, or you can leave it natural, or you can even give it a little burn. Choice is yours. I like to finish with multiple thin coats of clear coat. There's a lot of small areas in here and a lot of potential drip spots, so a couple thin coats is going to ensure I get a nice even finish. Then I just drop in my tea lights and I'm done. And I actually got some really nice scented tea lights for this. I always just go with plain on my projects, but I don't think I'm ever going to turn back now. Check those out too. They smell awesome. Next up is a dry vase made completely out of scrap pieces. I mean, you can use pretty much anything on this, even plywood. Actually, in my opinion, the plywood turned out one of the nicest parts of this project. So don't hesitate to throw that plywood in there, especially if you keep the smallest pieces like I do. Right now I'm just kind of taking inventory and seeing what I have to play with here. I'm going to make 3 3/4 inch by 3 3/4 inch squares. Overall I want the finished piece to be 3.5 inches square, so I'm going to leave myself a little bit of room to square it up after it's assembled. I didn't really have a set finish height in mind, I just stacked a bunch of pieces until I found kind of a design that I liked and went with that. Then using a straight edge I marked center on all my pieces. Could have made a jig for my drill press, but I know I'm going to square this up after when I'm done, so I didn't have to be overly precise. Just kind of precise. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? But I'm pretty dang close here. And I'm using an 1 3/4 inch Forstner bit because I left it in there from the last project and I thought it looked nice, so I made it easy on myself and just decided to go with that. Using a clamp to keep everything steady, I drill out all the holes in all the pieces, except for one. You gotta save one for the bottom. Man, do I always make that face when I'm using the drill press? It looks like I'm really not enjoying that, or the wood smells funny, but man, the things you see when you look at yourself on video, it's weird. When I get all my pieces drilled out, it's time to glue them up. And I know I already kind of went through this and found a design that I liked, but that was at least 15 minutes ago and I can't remember what it was now, so I'm going to do it a second time and convince myself that this is way better than the first one possibly could have been. I'm not really going to sand these per se right now, but some of these scrap pieces were real rough, so I'm just going to buff down the mating faces to get a better glue joint. I'll just brush on glue one layer at a time. And like I said earlier, I didn't bother making a jig, so some of these holes aren't exactly dead center. And since I want the hole to be centered all the way down through, that means some of the outside edges will be offset just a tiny bit. This is why I made it 3 3/4 inches wide instead of 3.5. I'll be able to straighten everything up on the table saw once it's all glued together. And fun fact, a tube of caulking is 1 3/4 inch in diameter, which makes it perfect to keep these holes lined up. Once I've got all the glue on, I clamp everything up. Unfortunately, right now I don't realize that that piece of plywood off to my right is supposed to be on the bottom. Luckily, I did notice this when I was cleaning up at the end of the night, so I got to stick it on and let the glue dry before I came back the next day. With the glue dry, I head over to the table saw so I can square everything up. And since my blade cannot reach all the way through this, I've got to resort to the old flippy over method. As you can see, I really didn't need to take much off at all. And I really find this method a lot easier than trying to perfectly align all these multiple small pieces. And now that everything's square, I've got to give it a real good sanding. And I start off with 120 on this. There's a lot of end grain and pieces of plywood here, so I knocked that down real quick, but I will work my way up to 220. I chose to go with a darker stain on this, and am I ever glad that I did. I love the way these different woods pop out and contrast each other. And what a great way to use up otherwise useless pieces of scrap. I mean, even the plywood, there's not many options to use up small pieces like this, so this is a great way to save it from the fire pit. And you just know with all this different grain and contrast, I've got to put a clear coat on it to really make it pop. This one does soak up a lot of clear coat though, but it's worth it. And just like that, you've taken pieces of scrap wood that were hiding in the darkest corner of your pile into something sellable that people will certainly appreciate. Next up is a handy picture hanger. These are perfect for hanging children's art and they do great at craft sales. Start by ripping down 1 1/4 pieces. You're going to need 4 altogether for this. The length can vary, but I'm going to cut mine down to 12 inches. A standard sheet of paper is 11 by 8.5 inches, but by making it a little bigger, you can use all different types of size pictures. And before I mark out for the magnets, I like to give it a rough sanding. I hold them all together like this and do the edges so that all the edges match up perfectly. Before I mark out for my magnets, I look all the pieces over and I select which sides I want to be the show pieces. Then I make sure I mark the inside of those pieces. And I'm going to place my magnets 2 inches in from the outside edge. Now, The reason I'm doing this is because I actually like the magnets to fall on the paper itself. So keep it in mind if you're using a 8.5 by 11 inch piece. I've got these spaced out about 8 inches apart now, so they're actually going to stick through the picture paper itself and hold it a little tighter. Then I set my drill press up with a Forstner bit that is the same diameter as the magnets. Then I set the depth so that it is the same depth as the magnets itself. I want everything to sit as flush as I can. I would be okay with it being, the magnet being slightly proud, maybe a 32nd of an inch. I started off using the 3/4 inch Forstner bit for my magnets, but when I put it all together, the magnets weren't quite strong enough to hold themselves up. So I had to order a new set of magnets, and they were 1 inch. So I had to come back and re-drill my pieces with a 1 inch Forstner bit. I'll leave a link in the description to these magnets as they were much better. Now on one of the top pieces, preferably the back, I need to mark out and drill for the string that is going to hold this up. And it really doesn't matter where you put the string on this as long as they're even on both sides. And one extra added touch that I like to do is I'll drill out the hole with the drill bit that is appropriately sized for the string, but then I'll come back with a slightly bigger bit and then just widen the mouth of that hole a little bit, and that'll allow the knot of the string to hide up in there instead of being hung out for everyone to see. Then I'll sand everything down to 220 and apply a couple coats of stain, making sure not to get stain in the areas that I'm going to be using glue for the magnets. In this clip I'm using the original weaker magnets, but for the newer ones I used the same method and I just used Gorilla Super Glue. The kit came with screws, but they were just a tad too long and they would have poked through the other side. And since I had to remove these magnets after they were dried, I got first-hand experience that glue is plenty strong to hold these in place. These make perfect gifts for anybody that's got small children, and they sell pretty darn quick at craft shows too. As always, thanks for watching. I appreciate each and every viewer. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and give me a like. Till next time.